Hi, you're listening to the Heidi Rue Show podcast featuring female leaders, creators, and innovators. I'm Heidi, and today's guest is Kaylee Klewein, and she has had quite the health journey. She has a blog called Modern Mayhem. She is a nutritionist, and she's a mom to 2 kids, 7 and 4 years old. She's married to her high school sweetheart. Her mission now is to help you see that healthy eating doesn't have to be boring. You don't have to eat boiled chicken and steamed broccoli for the rest of your life. Her health journey is really interesting, and I think it's something that probably a lot of you relate to, because Kaylee, after having 2 kids, over a 5-year period and dealing with a lot of health issues, she really struggled because she looked in the mirror all of a sudden and thought, wait a minute, I don't even know myself. And there's so much more that goes into that, even emotionally. Through that struggle, Kaylee has ended up figuring out a way to live a healthier lifestyle while juggling being a mom and a wife. And through that healthy lifestyle, she's not only felt better, but she's actually healed her hormones and her digestive system. Think that now she really feels like she's even better than the person that she knew before. Something that you're going to hear Kaylee talk about is postpartum depression. And I know a lot of you may have dealt with that or know somebody that does. And I'm so grateful that Kaylee was so open and honest and real about her struggle. I think it may encourage you to at least feel like you're not alone. So let's talk to Kaylee.
We did it.
All right.
We are.
So Kaylee, so many moms, and I think even women, they really can relate to your story. And also, if you're listening to the podcast and you hear some construction in the background, it's because there is construction in the background.
Life.
We're recording at the Atlanta Voiceover Studio, which I own with my husband, and we're having some little things done here and there this morning. So sorry, that's just been life recently.
Life.
I know.
Yeah,
you know how it is.
My house always sounds like this.
So sorry, Kaylee, back to you. So you had 2 kids. And then things kind of just started changing, like health-wise. And I think that so many people can relate to this feeling of all of a sudden waking up one day and feeling like, I don't feel like myself. Like I look in the mirror and I'm like, that's not me. That's not who I am. So what was going on during that time?
It was about 8 months after I had my second child. So before all of that, I mean, things had been crazy for probably a solid 4 years with having my first, then going through all that postpartum with her, which is a really long story that we can get into. Then getting pregnant with my second, and then he had some health issues that we were dealing with while I was pregnant, but then also when I had him. And it's weird how, they always say like really hard things like make you stronger, and it's so true. And I don't know why it happened but it just made me realize that like I can do anything, and I just felt really empowered. And he just him and his personality and the way he was going through all of it. I mean, he was a baby and he was just so strong, and I was just like, I need to show up for my kids, and I need to take better care of myself, and in turn, obviously I want to provide for them as well, and take, as best care of them as I could. So it was just kind of a culmination of things.
Yeah.
Like it was just a lot of little things that had added up, and it was just
I'm sorry, Kaylee, but can you share a little bit about the postpartum?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got pregnant with my daughter she was born in 2012. I quickly had some, not like crazy complications, but at 12 weeks at my ultrasound, I had placenta previa, to where my placenta was covering my cervix. So that just automatically made me have to have more ultrasounds, and it was just something that they were watching. And it was also, I couldn't work out. Like I couldn't do any physical activity because there was a risk of bleeding, or just, the placenta wasn't where it was supposed to be. When you're that early on, there's a chance that it can move as your uterus gets bigger. And so they were just constantly watching it. So, from the get-go, I just wasn't able to be active, and that was hard for me. So I feel like that was just kind of like the starting point of a very difficult pregnancy. At 20 weeks, I had another ultrasound, and she was like, everything looks great. It's moved up. It's still low-lying, but it's out of the way. So now C-section's not on, it's not a sure thing, because that's, if you have placenta previa, you have to have a
have to have a
C-section.
C-section,
So as a
okay.
new mom, I was like, and I was young. I was 24 years old.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any friends that had babies. All of my friends were just recently getting engaged. So I was the only one that was married. I was the only one, like, I didn't even know what I was doing. Like, I was just clueless.
That's so scary.
It was so scary. And so I was just like, you know, kind of panicking about that. And then they wanted to do another ultrasound at 30 weeks to just check on everything. And I found out that I had low amniotic fluid, or she had low amniotic fluid, and she was frank breech. So her head was up in my left rib cage and her feet were in my right rib cage, and she was folded in half, and then the fluid was really low. So she wasn't going to be able to get out of that position because she didn't have enough fluid to like move around. So then I was immediately put on really, really strict bed rest. I had to move in with my parents during the week. Thank God I have like the best support system ever. My mom would pick me up on Monday and take me to her house, and I laid on her couch. I had to lay on my left side. Couldn't cook my own food. I could only shower, you know, every so often because they didn't want me standing for long periods of time, exerting any energy. So that just mentally and emotionally, like, wore me out.
Oh,
like,
I'm sure.
It sounds like nice for like a week, but not even a week. You're like, you know, when you get sick and you're like in bed for 2 days, you're like, I'm going to lose my mind. This was 8 weeks. And I just like had to read a ton of books because and this was before like Netflix. Like I didn't even have anything that I could
Kaylee.
like, like I didn't even have anything I could like binge watch. Like it was TV and movies. And then I just read books all the time. And then I also had to do kick counts all the time because my doctor was like, if she doesn't move 10 times in an hour, that means she's, you know, could possibly be in distress, and I want you to go to the hospital. So I'm spending 24 hours a day, every hour, counting her movements. She's also breached. She could barely move. So it was like, was that 10? Was that not 10? I would wake myself up in the middle of the night to do kick counts because I was terrified that I was going to sleep and wake up and not know that something was wrong. So it was just like wore on me to like another level that I didn't even understand then. Like I get it now, but I had no idea how mentally and emotionally like traumatizing that is. And then I was hospitalized at 34 weeks because my fluid got so low. I was having ultrasounds every week to check the fluid levels. And she told me if it got to a certain level, I was going to have to go to the hospital. And it did. So I spent my 23rd or 24th birthday in the hospital. Put me on IV fluids. I think I was in there for 2 or 3 days. And honestly, it was better being in the hospital because at least there was people coming in and out all the time. Whereas when I was at home, I was by myself all day. So I was kind of more entertained being there because there was so much going on. You know, like hospitals are people flying in and out constantly. So anyways, long story short, them putting me on the fluids helped enough for me to go home, but I was still like extremely high risk. I had a scheduled C-section at 38 weeks. Thank God I made it to 38 weeks. I had the scheduled C-section. It was absolutely horrible. I didn't realize how bad my C-section was with her until I had another one. I felt everything and I didn't realize how much I felt that I shouldn't have felt again until I had something to compare it to.
Yeah.
I was in so much pain that it took me a really, really, really long time to heal. And of course, being, you know, a woman and thinking that I tried to like only take Advil after. I didn't want to take any of the pain medication. And my dad basically like forced me to. I had an allergic reaction to the anesthesia. So I was like vomiting after I had her, and my skin was really itchy. I was to the point where I like wanted to rip my nose off. So it was just like one thing after the other with everything with the pregnancy. Like it was just not good.
I'm surprised you even had another kid.
Well, the only reason it happened is because we went to Breckenridge for New Year's Eve, and there was a lot of things happening that made me like not in my normal frame of mind. Truly, that is the only way that I was going to be able to mentally wrap my mind around it. But she was perfect, and she is perfect, and she was a great baby, and she was so healthy, and thank God it was just the pregnancy that sucked. But once she was out of me, we were both like good to go. That being said, it was extremely traumatizing for me. And I I had a really hard time basically transitioning back to life because I hadn't even gone to the grocery store in 2 months. I hadn't driven a car. I hadn't left my house. Like, the only time I got in the car is my mom would take me to my house on the weekend and then bring me back to her house, like to my parents' house during the week. So at least I had like a little bit of change of scenery, and I could spend the weekend at home with my husband. Like, and he moved in with us too. Like, he would spend the weeks at my parents' house with me. And so after I had her, it was everything was okay. And I had a really hard time nursing, and I just was not mentally able to grasp any of that or go to those lengths to figure out how to make it work. So I just stopped and I pumped, and I did that as long as I could. But then the postpartum started setting in, and I started noticing that something wasn't right, and that I wasn't feeling right. And I was having panic attacks, and I didn't even know what that was. I wasn't somebody that had anxiety or had panic attacks. So I didn't know what was happening. And I'm so fortunate that I had the best OB, still do. And I called her and I explained what I was feeling, and she had me come in immediately. She immediately put me on antidepressants. They have a psychologist in their office, in like their center, which was amazing. She had me set an appointment up with her first thing. They adjusted my medication based on my first meeting with her. She gave me a lot of tools. We talked about, it was tons of things. It's never just, it was the hormones from the pregnancy and the trauma of everything. And it was postpartum, and it was a lot of things. But, I had family stuff going on at that time too. And I lived at home until I got married, and I was extremely close with my parents. And it was hard for me to like disconnect from that. But once I had a baby, I couldn't still be in that. You know what I mean? So it was me learning how to be an adult, also got married and had a baby. It was just a lot of things.
Yeah, you can totally see why there's panic attacks.
Right, exactly. And it was just so much change in such a short period of time. And that's kind of what she showed me. And it makes you realize, like, I'm not incapable and I'm not crazy.
Yes.
It's just a lot of change happened in a really short period of time. And it's just hard to mentally and emotionally cope with that. Yeah. And I didn't have the tools. I just wasn't, there yet. And so that, on top of all the pregnancy issues and the bed rest, it was a recipe for a disaster. Like, it was really hard, but I had, again, like, I'm so thankful. My husband, he saw the signs. And I mean, I would cry in the morning, like panicking, crying and not wanting him to leave because I was terrified to be by myself with her. Like, it was a fear I've never felt. And when she would cry is when I would have a panic attack. I would start sweating profusely. Like, I've never felt that way in my life. And it was so bizarre. It was like this weird biological reaction I was having to her cries.
Yeah.
And it just brought this like fear over me that I wasn't able to like cope with. It was wild. So the combination of getting on antidepressants and going and seeing her and doing the sessions with her and doing the work, fortunately, I was able to get off medication pretty quickly. I feel like that just kind of helped like rebalance everything. And then I weaned off of it, but I continued to go see the psychologist and work through the anxiety and some of that stuff, because it was a lot of other things, as it always is. So I feel like that was pretty good. We got into a groove. She was a great baby. And then I decided to go back to work. I was actually a finance major, and I worked in asset management. And so I ended up going back to work when she was, I think she was like 8 or 9 months old. Okay. I didn't like being at home. I didn't like, and I was very isolated. I told you before, I lived really far out. I lived in the freaking boonies. Yeah. And so I was super isolated, and I just wanted to like, and I'm a social person, and I like to like go and do and be, and I wanted to work, and so I went back to work, and I worked for an asset management company in Cartersville. So it was nice. So I didn't have to like commute to Atlanta or anything. So that worked out really well. Changed jobs. That's a whole nother story. I went to work for a nonprofit. I did that for a while. And then, that's when I got pregnant with Reed. Okay. So Amelia was like 2.5 years old when I got pregnant with him. And I had him in September of 2015. My pregnancy with him was totally different. I didn't have any of those complications.
Were you just so, like, I want to know that moment when you were like, I'm pregnant again. Mm-hmm. Oh, crap. Like,
I knew with 100% certainty that I was pregnant before I even took a pregnancy test.
Wow.
It was weird. I told my girlfriend that I worked with, I was like, I need to go. I had just gotten back from Breckenridge, and I was like, I need to go to Target to get prenatal vitamins. Like, I need to start taking them now because I know that I'm pregnant. Because I wasn't taking them. A lot of times they tell you to like start taking them way before like you're trying to conceive. And so I did that with Amelia. With Reed, I was like, oh crap. So, which is fine. So I started taking prenatal vitamins, and then I, had a positive pregnancy test, like I think 2 or 3 weeks later. So it was wild. Like, I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I can't do that again.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I can do that again. But but it was weird at the same time. I had this like sense that I knew that I wasn't going to have to do that again. But everything was good. My pregnancy again with him was very different. I didn't have the placenta previous stuff, so I didn't have all that extra stuff in the beginning. But they did do an ultrasound. It's weird how this happens. Normally you don't have an ultrasound at 30 weeks.
Yeah.
They scheduled an ultrasound with me for Reed at 30 weeks because of my history with my first pregnancy. Sure. That is where they found his kidney disease. So at 30 weeks, I had an ultrasound, and they found that he had fluid in his left kidney. It's called hydronephrosis. So if I would have never had that ultrasound, which most people don't, they would have never found it.
Yeah.
And it was a blessing and a curse because.
And what would happen if they didn't find it?
He would be fine. It's not a fatal thing. It can be, I think, if it gets to like really bad point, but people live with it for a really long time. People can live with it and not even know until they're like in their 60s.
Wow.
They'll start having like chronic UTIs or like kidney infections, and they'll go in and see that they have fluid on their kidney. So,
Gotcha.
Or the kidney will like cease to exist and your body just like absorbs it. It's crazy.
Wow.
So, but now with technology, they can like do a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a blessing and a curse. Like I go back and forth in my mind because sometimes I'm like, I wish I just never would have known and I would have just dealt with it when we had to deal with it. But then I'm like, I'm really glad that we were able to do what we had to do. So he wasn't having to deal with that stuff later on in life. But it sucks to be pregnant and find out that your baby inside you has this. And so we immediately had to go to a high risk OB. He already had a pediatric urologist while he was still in my stomach. So it just transferred from it being issues with my pregnancy with my first one to it being something that was wrong with him, which was a whole nother level of scary.
Sure.
That like terrified me.
Right.
Since I didn't know what was going to happen after he was born. That's what was so scary. But it's so weird that I didn't waver at all. Like, I think because I did the work with Amelia, it set me up to be able to handle it. Like, it's crazy. Like, as a mom, I think it's like fight or flight, and you just like do it and you get into the emotions. So they monitored it the whole time I was pregnant. I had a scheduled C-section with him as well. But I went into labor on my own, and so I had him a couple days earlier than I was supposed to. Everything was great. It was like the easiest.
Wow.
It was. I feel like it was just like the easiest thing ever. I don't know if it's because I like had contractions and my body was like ready. Yeah. But the epidural or the spinal worked perfectly. I didn't feel anything. It was so easy. And it was like a dream compared to, and I told them my reactions to the anesthesia. So they gave me something ahead of time. They gave me an anti-nausea. They gave me an anti-itch or whatever. So I knew all of that going into it. So I didn't have any of those reactions. So that was like a godsend. Had him, was like, always that normal like cloud nine thing. And he was a great baby too. And everything was great. He was perfect.
Yeah.
But still that lingering, I knew that after he was 2 weeks old, we were going to have to go in and start doing testing to figure out what was the cause of the fluid. So there's like multiple reasons that you can have hydronephrosis. So they had to do a bunch of tests to rule that out. And so then basically from then on until he was 2.5 years old, we were constantly having to do renal scans and ultrasounds, which the ultrasounds weren't bad. The renal scans were pretty rough. He had to have an IV, a catheter, and they would strap him to a table for an hour in a papoose and take scans while his kidney processed nuclear dye. And we did that. The first one we did that, he was 2 months old.
Oh my gosh.
So at 2 weeks, he had to test out, like to rule out reflux, which is where the fluid goes back up. He didn't have that. So then it was moving on to the next thing, which is a kink in his ureter. That's what the renal scan showed. So he had that at 2 months, 5 months, a year, 18 months. Then they finally decided to operate when he was 18 months, and it's a 2-part surgery. The first one he was under for like 2.5 hours, and it was pretty intense, and we had to stay overnight in the hospital. The second one was outpatient. It was to remove the stent that they had put in place 6 weeks prior. So again, like leading up to that until he was like 2.5, that was just our routine. But in the middle of that, that is when I made this like huge change. Like, I don't know what it was. Like, I don't know. It was just me like wanting to have better, I just wanted to be the healthiest I could possibly be for him and for Amelia, so that I could like instill that in them, and then also in our family and just our lives. Like, I just knew that I didn't want to feel the way that I was feeling. Yeah. So,
well, it's interesting because I think a lot of times when you see somebody else going through a health issue, I know for me, it impacted me tremendously. Yeah. I mean, we lost my aunt to breast cancer last summer, and thank you. And it was so hard, but man, it was so impactful in my own health journey.
Well, they do say like you don't realize like how important your health is until you don't have it. And I wasn't personally going through severe health things. I had the little things here and there. I'd always had like chronic stomach issues, and that was a lot of issues that I was dealing with. But that was on a whole nother level, like seeing your baby in a hospital and hooked up to all these, needles and IVs and machines. And it was just like, this is terrifying, and I'm kind of like a control freak too, a little bit. I think like most women are. And it was like something that I could really like control. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I knew that if I was doing everything I could, then the rest of it's out of my control. I can't fix any of that, but I can control what I'm putting in my body, what I'm putting in his body. I was, nursing him. Like, I nursed him for a really, really, really long time because of all of this. It was the one thing that I could calm him down immediately. And like, even when we were in the hospital, like they would do his IV and then I would immediately nurse him and he would just be fine. So I was just so thankful that I could keep doing that. So I did nurse him for a really long time. I think maybe a little too long. My husband's like, ma'am, this is getting weird. And I'm like, sorry. But I knew that I was like, I need to just do it until his surgeries, and then we'll be done and we can move past it. So, and then another piece of that is he had to be on a prophylactic antibiotic every single day of his life, the day that he was born. I finally made the decision to pull him off of it when he was like 5-6 months old, with a conversation that I had with the pediatric urologist. I looked at all of my options. That was when I was starting to really understand what that does to your body and what it was doing to his system. And in hindsight, I don't know. Who knows what would have happened, but I literally am like pissed at myself every day that he was on that. But then again, I'm like, I don't know what would have happened. I was taking the advice of his, specialist, and he was a baby, and I didn't want to put him in worse harm. So that's when I started to really learn about holistic health, whole health, your gut, the health of all of that. Every single thing you put in your mouth that you're eating, you're either helping disease or you're fighting disease or you're causing it. Like, it's one or the other. So I just really started researching, and obviously I had put on weight, as most women do when they go through pregnancies, especially when you're laying down for 2 months and your only joy is to like eat 20 donuts.
Sure.
Excuse me. So I had put on a substantial amount of weight, and I was the least active I've ever been in my entire life. I was a super, super active person. I was in competitive sports my whole life. And then that just stopped, like cold turkey stopped. And I ate like crap. Like, I was a true like 90s kid that lived off of State Farm corn dogs and fruit roll-ups and Cheetos. Like, that was my favorite meal. Swiss cake rolls, Little Debbie's, like all of it. Like, that was my jam, processed food. But it did come from like a background of my mom cooked at home, and my mom always came from like more of a like crunchy granola. Like, my grandma has used essential oils before essential oils were like even a thing. Like, she like is the OG. And my aunts and my mom and my grandma used to drink that barley green, that like really green stuff, which is basically like wheatgrass. she did that all the time. So I was always like around stuff like that. And I was always kind of like more on like the earthy, like naturalistic side of things. But again, like, you know, you're raised in the 90s, you just lived on that kind of stuff. So it was an interesting shift, but I felt like I did have kind of like the foundations to really start to like dive into that lifestyle.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So then what happened? Like you said that there was a friend of yours that kind of introduced you to a fitness thing. So that kind of started it even before you started with the food,
for
right?
sure. So I always laugh at them. I'm like, you guys were probably like, you really need to come work out. Like in a nice way. They were like, And I was still living out in, it was in New Hartley, which is like, again, way, way out there. But they were like, just come. They lived more in like the Woodstock area. And again, I was like a super athletic person. And so they knew that I would like it. And I was like, sure, like the first class is free. I had no intention of doing it because I just didn't think it was feasible with where I lived. And I love that kind of stuff. Like I love that environment. I like really like high intensity. Like I like stuff that I feel like I'm almost going to like pass away at the end. Not always the best thing for your body, but I love it. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And I like people like yelling at me. That's what I'm used to. So I did the first class and I loved it. And it was so fun to do together. You know, it was two of my best friends. I'd known both of them since I was 10. So they're like my sisters. So they could have that conversation with me and be like, all right, you need to like, you're not having any more kids. You know, you need to like lock it up in like a nice way. Yeah. Like start caring about yourself, basically. Like they didn't care about my weight or what I looked like. And I didn't either. Like I think I was delusional. I don't even think I realized how much weight I had gained because I didn't grow up, thank God, around a mom or anybody in my life that was like, did diets or anything. So I was really fortunate. I know we've kind of talked about like that whole Weight Watchers thing. That was like mind blowing to me because I did not grow up in that environment at all, which I'm so thankful for. But I do think I was a little like delusional, like about my health and how much I had really like not been taking care of myself. I don't want to say like let myself go because I think that's bullshit, but I just wasn't taking care of myself.
Right.
So that was the jump start. And then it just kind of spiraled from there.
It's so interesting too to hear that story because I think that for a lot of people, I know for me, I mean, when I go, if I go like 2 weeks without working out or something like that, then it is so hard to get back there. And so I'm so impressed that you're like, yeah, let's just do this, you know, without like having somebody have to drag you or like, let's just start walking for a little bit and then build up.
I was terrified. I really thought I might die. Like I was so scared. I was like, my heart's going to just stop. Like I haven't done anything like this. This cold is killing me. I haven't done anything like this. It was probably like 5 years since I had like even worked out and even 5 years I hadn't worked out that intense, but I love that kind of stuff. And so, and my body, like, it was like, cool, like I can do this. Like it loved it. And it, again, I think for people, a lot of times it's good, like for mental health as well. And it was an excuse to leave my kids for an hour and get out of the house and be around my girlfriends. And so we used to make like a date of it every week, like Wednesday nights. We didn't do it all the time, but we would like go work out late after we would put the kids to bed. And then we would go get like sushi and a drink. So it was just this really positive, fun thing for me. I didn't even really feel like working out. And then I'm like a Gemini through and through. So I'm like one extreme to the other. And I went like all in and I was driving an hour one way and I was working out I was doing it 5 days a week.
Wow.
Cause I just loved it. And I didn't even like have a weight loss goal. I wasn't like, I'm going to lose this much weight. Obviously I started seeing changes and I was like, oh, okay, this is working. So probably about a month in, I was like, I'm spending a ton of time. My husband's making a huge sacrifice for me to be able to do this. So I need to like do it. Like I need to start really incorporating the food side of it. That was way harder than the working out. Way harder. Now I feel like it's the opposite for me. I'm like, cool, I got this food thing down. But the working out, sometimes I'm like, ugh.
Right.
You know, it's just like another thing to have to get to, another appointment to have to be at. Just, I think my kids are older and they just have a lot more going on. Then they were little and they just stayed at home.
Right.
So it was a lot easier. And it was my like, away time.
Sure.
So I would like crave it.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm constantly all over the place and I just want to be at home. I'm like,
Right.
can I please just stay at home?
Stay at home. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of flip-flopped for me. But again, I'm all or nothing. So I just started researching and going like really into the whole food side of it.
So there wasn't anything like health-wise or anything that happened with the food stuff. You just thought, okay, wait a minute. I can't keep working out and then still eating the,
Well, I've
cake
always
rolls.
had a super hypersensitive system. And I didn't feel good, but honestly, at that time, I didn't realize how many issues I had until I started the process. Like I'd had chronic IBS my whole life. I was in high school and had colonoscopies. They thought maybe I had Crohn's. I had my entire pregnancy with both of my kids. I had heinous heartburn and acid reflux, which is normal for pregnancy, but I think it was pretty extreme because of my diet and my issues with what I was eating. And I had it when I wasn't pregnant too. Like I had acid reflux. I remember I went to the doctor in high school and that's when they thought maybe I had Crohn's. And I basically just left and they told me I had IBS and that they gave me medication for the cramping. They just gave me a bunch of medication to mask all of my symptoms. So I was already kind of in that mindset that I knew that it was something that I was eating. And I, again, like my mom's friend was like she's very holistic and I would talk to her a lot. So I did have little like nuggets that were trying to like show me, but I wasn't ready to hear it. And I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't in the right headspace.
Yeah.
I didn't really care. I was in high school. I was in college. I didn't really care, you know? And then I went right out of college, straight into getting married, straight into having babies. And I didn't even really have the time or thought to be like, this is something I'm eating. So when I did start eating better and I started seeing those symptoms subside and I wasn't dealing with all of the things that I was dealing with, I was like, hello. like really? You waited this long.
Yes.
But I think that's so true for so many people. Like you can't push that on people.
No.
Like they have to be ready to hear it or just ready to deal with it. And food is tough.
It is tough. And it is overwhelming
Extremely
to think about
overwhelming.
changing what you eat.
And everybody's different. Bioindividuality is everything. What my food, like one person's food is another person's poison. If you ate like I ate, you probably wouldn't feel well and you would probably have side effects from it or something.
Like some people can do beans, some people can't.
Right. I can't. Like and I wish I could. I'm like, I get it. Like I'm not like, I don't like to bash food groups because I just think that that's a slippery slope. It's just like, that is what works for my DNA. Like there's no like way around it, unfortunately.
Right.
So
what was your game plan with clean eating?
The food was very small. Like it was like a 2-week like it was like, all right, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks. That's all I could wrap my mind around.
Yeah.
Like it was baby steps. Like I was crawling through it. So it was not overnight. It was not easy for me. I was somebody who ate like crap in the morning. I would eat like a really like starchy white bagel with cream cheese. Well, I'm super, super intolerant to dairy. Might possibly have an allergy to it. I've never been tested, but what it does to me, like it's more than just like a food sensitivity or an intolerance. So I just started trying to like cut things out and see how I felt and started listening to my body. But it was almost like day by day, to be honest. Like I was like, I can do this for a day.
Yeah.
And then a day turned into a week, and then a week turned into a month. And then it just became habitual. And then obviously I started seeing crazy results. My body was responding to the workouts like crazy, but I think it's because I was a super active person before. So I started burning fat and switched to a more, like veggie, protein, fat-based diet, cut out a lot of almost all processed food. So, I mean, those two combined, like you're going to see some pretty crazy results. So, I mean, I lost weight too fast. I would never advise anyone to lose weight the way that it's not that I didn't do it in the wrong way, but it was just so fast that it was very jarring to my system. Like, I mean, it took me a while to get hormone wise, like it messed me up. And my OB told me, she said, it will take you a year to get back to normal from all of that.
And it was just because you had already been working out a lot, and then you added just like all clean eating, and it was like you're all or nothing.
It was a huge shock to my system.
Yeah.
Huge shock. I think it's a lot healthier to, kind of ease into it. And I didn't go super crazy with the food at first, but once I like had it down, I was like, cool, like let's rock and roll. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, within 6 months, I had lost, I think, like 50 pounds. Like that's a huge shift. And like hormones are stored in fat. Estrogen is stored in fat. So as a woman, to lose that much fat percentage that quickly, it's really hard on your body and on your hormones to be like, now what?
Right.
So, and I didn't tell you, there's a whole nother piece to my health too. I was on birth control for a really long time, and I got off of it to get pregnant with my daughter. In the process, I started getting like really bad cysts, ovarian cysts, and I had one rupture before I got pregnant with her. So it ruptured, and then I got pregnant with her like a couple months later. I went to the hospital. It was horrible. And then I continued to have them. I think I had a cyst while I was pregnant with her. Like they would see it on my right ovary while I was pregnant with her. So I was always having like chronic cysts and hormonal imbalances. And then I actually had one get really, really big after I had Reed. I think it was honestly the same one. It was always on my right ovary, and it was like the torsion where it started twisting, and I went to the hospital like it was like 2 days before Christmas. So I also had that side of it. I had a lot of the hormonal imbalances that at the time I didn't understand was completely and 100% related to my diet.
Really?
So when I started eating differently, this is what has been a game changer for me, is when I started eating this way, it stabilized my hormones and it went away.
Wow. So you have had no cysts since?
I went in for a checkup. My OB wanted to see my cyst because she's like, it's to a point to the size that we might have to remove it because it could damage your ovary. And so I went in for an ultrasound, and she's like, it's gone. Like, it's not there anymore. It was huge.
Oh my gosh.
Like wild.
Yeah.
So just by figuring out what worked for my body, and then really a lot, we could get into like the super technical side of things, but it's mostly like causes of insulin, like PCOS is insulin resistance. And the way that I was eating was keeping my insulin levels super, super, super like just straight lined the entire time. I wasn't getting a lot of the ups and downs and the crashes and spikes from the way I was eating before, which was very like sugar ridden from processed foods, processed carbohydrates. I always say sugarholic because I don't like to say carboholic because I can't stand like the negative feelings against carbs because it's like complete BS. Right. Like 90% of what I eat are carbs. Yeah. Like they're just different carbs.
Sure.
You have to qualify them, you know, they're not all the same. So it was just like a very like sugary diet that was causing me to have like severe hormonal imbalances. So got rid of the acid reflux, the heartburn, the IBS, the PCOS, you know, cysts rupturing nightmare, all of that gone.
That's amazing. And define clean eating, what that means.
So clean eating is just basically as minimally processed as like your rawest form of food is how I like to think of it. That's my perception of it. I know that term gets thrown out a lot, and I do think that it has almost become part of diet culture, which I hate. But I just like to think of it as like kicking it old school, like just back to the basics. If you don't know what it is, if you can't pronounce it, if you know you can't like see it or create it yourself or grow it, then we shouldn't be eating it. Yeah. Like if it wasn't alive, like it wasn't in the ground, don't eat it. Like it's just not good for you. Right. Our bodies don't know what to do with it. So that's my whole like perception on clean eating, is just keeping it just real whole foods.
And if somebody was to say, okay, I hear you, I want to start eating more clean, I don't know if I could totally go all out right from day one. Yeah. Where is a good place for somebody to start?
So I always tell people, and like I have a few clients because I ended up going to school for integrative nutrition because I just loved it so much and I wanted to know more. And so I do have a couple clients, and what I always tell them, and I share my story with them and how I'm like, that's not good. Like we need to just make this a lifestyle. I always say pick one thing and do that really, really well. So say, for example, added sugar. There's added sugar to everything. I mean, your jarred can of fire roasted tomatoes. Unnecessary. That doesn't do anything, so if you're making a chili, you're like, perfect, this is great. Well, now you're eating 10 grams of sugar in your chili. That's unnecessary. Like, I'd rather you eat a cookie, because then at least you're getting a cookie.
Right.
So just focus on that.
Okay.
Read your labels. That alone will cut out so much of your processed food, because if you make like a deal with yourself, like, I'm not going to eat anything that has added sugar, that will cut out like 75% of food.
Okay.
And then you'll start being more, aware of things and aware of your ingredients, and you'll start reading labels, and that is huge. And there are now so many amazing brands that have realized that, that this is not a good thing, that all of this sugar is not good for us. And so, like, ketchup,
right. Ketchup has so much sugar.
But there's so many good brands now that don't have any added sugar in them. They're fabulous. So it's like, you don't have to not eat ketchup. Just don't eat the ketchup with the added sugar. Sure. Okay. Or, so just something simple like that. Or just adding, like, the thought of crowding out. If you add more of something, you're going to eat less of the other thing. So just adding more vegetables, more fiber. If you add more of those foods, you're not going to be hungry to eat all the other processed stuff. Right. So
I love that term, crowding out, because I've been trying to figure out how do I a good term for even the way I look at my health stuff. I don't ever count calories.
Good.
But what I started to do, and I'm so busy, so sometimes it's really hard, but what I focused on doing is like, okay, I'm just trying to get at least 9 cups of like vegetables every day in.
And that's a lot.
And if I can do that, then it's been a good day.
Yeah.
And now there's some days that I don't, but I always try to do it. And if I know it's a crazy day, then I will like blend those suckers in the Vitamix.
Exactly. And just suck it down.
Stuff them all in there.
Get them one
and
way
get
or
what
the
I
other.
can get.
Yeah.
But it's been such a great shift for me to think more of like, okay, let's fill myself like what did you say?
Crowding out.
Crowding out.
So
Love
you're
that
just
term.
Basically like smothering the bad stuff with the good.
Because I hate the feeling of like, I can't have
That's
this.
the thing. It takes away from the focus of being what you can't have, and it puts all the emphasis on things that you can have, and that's adding in instead of taking away.
Yes.
So if I'm like, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this, you're going to leave and be like, well, that's really depressing. But if I'm like, I want you to start eating this, and I want you to try this, and I want you to mix this together, and I want you to make this, you're like, oh, that's so exciting. I get to try new things. Like, it's all mental. Everything is mental.
Right.
It's all habitual, and it's all mental. And once you do something for so long, then it just becomes a habit. So it's also crowding out the not so favorable habits with the better habits. Like, I used to like to drink every night. Like, I didn't drink excessively, but it's not necessary, and it's not good for my body to like consume things, consume alcohol on a regular basis. So I would just have a cup of hot tea, and that sounds super lame, but it was just a habit.
Yes.
It wasn't
like I'm
doing
anything. So why not?
And it was when I was cooking. I like to like drink while I'm cooking. So like I'll just have tea, or I'll like pour sparkling water in a wine glass. Like it's just that habitual act.
Yeah.
And what is it? They say like 21 days to form a new habit.
To form a new habit, yeah.
That's kind of how I mentally wrapped my mind around it. It was like, I just have to do this until I become second nature.
Is there a good clean sugar substitute?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different in the wellness and health world. So, something that's really big right now is keto, and keto has its place. And I think it works really well for certain people. Again, the bio individuality thing. It's great for people with disease or stuff like that. But it uses a lot of like synthetic sugars, which I'm personally not a fan of, because
and synthetic sugars are like
stevia. And some people will be like, well, that's from a plant. But I'm like, yeah, but it's been like chemically derived. Like it's been pulled. You know what I mean? Or like what's that one that's like xylitol?
Oh, yes.
There's a couple of them that are like approved on the list of keto that are a sweetener. I personally, it's just my thought process that if I'm going to eat something sweet, I want it to be like maple syrup or honey, like natural occurring. Yes, it has a lot of sugar in it, for sure. Maple syrup has a lot of sugar, but my body knows what it is. It knows exactly what to do with it. And I'm not saying you should eat it all the time, but I feel like tricking your body into like eating something that's sweet, but then it's not actually sweet,
right,
is very confusing.
It is.
It's like, just eat the sugar.
Yeah. My
and
body
move
doesn't
on.
like that. It's like, girl, rude.
Yeah, exactly.
Rude.
Like, just go for it, you know, and then do better, or, you know, you'll feel like crap, and sometimes it's worth it.
Yeah.
You know, like there's days that I go to Whole Foods and I'm standing in the line and there's those humongous like chocolate chip cookies, and I'll just eat like 3 of them, and I literally feel like I'm going to throw up, but I'm like, well, tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the end of the world.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, you just got to relinquish the guilt.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that a lot of people are probably going, okay, yeah, but if I make this change, that's one thing, but I have to get my whole family on board because can't be making 2 different meals.
No.
So how did that work out?
Well, my kids didn't really have a choice.
Okay.
I am like a firm, like, I'm pretty hardcore when it comes to that stuff. I'm like, I'm the parent, you're the child, you don't grocery shop, so this is what you're eating, you know? But I'm not like a huge stickler on food with them. I like it. I don't want to create any negative feelings for them with food. I don't demonize food with them. If they want to eat it, that's fine. But I explain to them, they're old enough now, especially Amelia, she's 7. I can explain to her why those things aren't ideal to eat all the time. I tell her she can have it and she'll eat it. But in doing that, my kids don't glorify those foods.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I want a cupcake. I'm like, okay, have a cupcake. They eat a bite of it. You know, they're not like, oh, I never get cupcakes. And then they eat the whole entire cupcake in 5 seconds because they're like, I've never had it. I don't ever get cupcakes. I'm going to eat as many as I possibly can. So I've never demonized food with them. I just explain to them like the benefits of food. My daughter's super scientific, so she loves that kind of stuff. Like I tell her like things that it's good for her, and like this is really good for your brain, and this is what makes you see really good. And so I explain like the scientific behind it. Reed was so little when I made this change, so he doesn't know any different. He was only 8 months old when I like really shifted our lifestyle. Men, oof.
Yeah, girl.
Yeah. I am probably, if you know my husband and me and our dynamic, like he is the easiest going person in the entire world. Like truly, like I don't know if there's like a person on this planet that is easier than him. He's very easy to be married to. So I never have like a great understanding of that, except for like a little bit because my dad is very tough. Like my mom gets frustrated because he doesn't ever want to eat certain things. So I do see it on, you know, I've experienced it with that, but he doesn't care. Like he just saw that it was something super important to me, and he's not a picky eater. And as long as it's there, he'll eat it. And then he started reaping the benefits. And, you know, me, I was doing Orange Theory for probably 6 months, and then he decided to join, and now he does it more than I do. He gets up every morning at 4:30 and goes and works out. He ran an ultra marathon. Like he did all of this stuff because of the shifts that I made, and then started doing it as a family, and it just became part of our lives. Like it wasn't, it's just, I don't know. It was just our lives. Like we didn't think about it any differently.
Yeah.
So I think like it's, again, baby steps, especially for, you know, your family and your kids, because kids are tough, especially if they're a little bit older and they're kind of set in their food ways, and it's just exhausting. Like fighting your kids over food, there's nothing more stressful.
Right.
It's still stressful for me. But I think explaining it to them, and honestly, cooking with your kids will change everything. And same for your husband. We cook together. Like Ryan and I always cook together. Whenever I first started this change, we wouldn't cook our meal until the kids went to bed. And it's different now because they're older, so we like to eat together, but they were so little. And we would cook together, and it was our time. And it forced him to like understand, you know, foods as well. And we kind of did it together instead of me being in complete control of it and then just being like, you have to eat this.
Right.
So it's almost like you got to treat men like children.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
just kidding.
Yeah, I like
but kind
that.
of like make it a process together, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, whenever my kids cook, they will try so much more than if I just make it.
Interesting.
And especially while we're cooking, like they'll be like, what is this? This looks weird. And they'll just sit there and start eating it. So really by the time you make it, you're like, they don't even have to eat it. They've already eaten half of it, you know?
Sure.
So that has been a game changer. And it's not easy. I mean, cooking with kids is frustrating.
Sure.
Because it's a disaster. But you just have to go into it open-minded with no expectations. I know not everyone can have a garden, but growing your own food, my kids will eat anything if we grew it. If I bought it at the grocery store, like if I bought Brussels sprouts at a grocery store, my kids wouldn't eat them. I grew them in our garden. They stood out in our garden and ate them off the plant.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's our human nature. I think it's biologically embedded in us. Like that's how I get so like crunchy granola about that kind of stuff, but it's like how we were made to naturally be. So it just feels right. There's just something about like standing in the dirt and digging around in it and then seeing something come to life and then eating it. Like it's just so much more, it's just very rewarding.
Yeah.
And you appreciate your food a lot more.
Right.
And they do.
Right.
They see how hard it is.
Yeah. So what did you do about Halloween? Is this like,
I just let them go.
Oh,
yeah.
And then do you let them just have a little bit every night, or?
I mean, if they want to eat all of it in one sitting, I'm like, go for it. But they don't. They don't eat. Honestly, they haven't touched their Halloween candy in probably 2 or 3 days, and it's sitting out. They can reach it. They can get to it. I don't restrict them of that kind of stuff, like, because I just see what kind of pattern that creates, and I just don't make a big deal about it. I don't like hoard it or hide any of it. I just, because it's once a year. Yeah. Like that's not going to do anything. And I know that they had a really good breakfast and they had a good lunch that I packed them. And so if they eat 3 Snickers bars for snack, you know, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. They're not doing that every day. So I just don't really make a big deal about it. I don't really.
Do you apply that same kind of mindset to the holidays?
Yes, 100%. The holidays are hard for me because I truly get sick from foods, especially dairy. So, and you know, holiday foods are butter
charcuterie
and
boards
and
galore.
Charcuteries, and I love a charcuterie board, and I love cheese. Like it's like my favorite food, but I cannot eat it. It makes me so sick. But sometimes I do, and I just have to deal with the repercussions. Like I have to take heartburn medication because I know I'm going to be sick or I'm going to be on the toilet. Like that's just my reality. But I think the holidays can cause a lot of like, you know, food anxiety and food fear. And for me, I just try to like, I just decide, I'm like, I'm either going to eat this and I'm going to feel horrible and I'm going to deal with it, or I'm not going to eat it. Like it's a choice. And I don't really, sometimes I choose to eat it and sometimes I don't. Yeah. I do try to like the day of Thanksgiving, I think it's always like really hectic, even like Christmas Day and you're cooking. I do try to eat like a really good breakfast and I load up. Like I'll eat like a very like large like bowl or salad or like a Nourish bowl with a ton of veggies and a good like lean protein. That way when we do get to like the Thanksgiving meal, I'm not, because I feel like everybody just doesn't eat until the meal.
Oh, it's so true. Yeah,
and then you're just ravenous and you're like, your eyes are bigger than your stomach and your plate is so full and you're just ill. Like you just afterwards, you're like, oh my God. Yes. So yeah, I try, like that has helped me a ton.
That's a great idea.
So kind of the same principle as like crowding out. It's like if I've eaten all of this stuff and I know that I've gotten like all my really good veggies, then I'm less like hungry and my body is not like, oh, I need all this food. I'm like, I'll just have a little bit of this here and there. Thankfully, there are really good like substitutes for stuff. So if I'm cooking the food, then I will still use ghee instead of butter. I won't put cheese in it. I'll use coconut milk instead of cream. But if I'm hosting people, I don't want people to have to eat. It's not as good. Yeah. Butter is delicious and cheese is great. Yeah. Like you can't, there's a substitute for cream. There's just not. So I don't want other people to feel like they have to eat the way that I eat. I don't like to force that upon people. Yeah. So I just suck it up.
Yeah.
Just wear a diaper. Just kidding.
I love it.
Kind of.
That's going to be the quote from,
just wear a diaper.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Just wear a diaper. It's okay. It happens once a year.
Yeah. So, you know, but it's wild. I never really like thought about it. I spent Christmas Eve. My whole family's from Kansas, and the tradition was to have beef stroganoff, which is sour cream, and it's just so rich and it's so delicious. And then we would go to midnight mass, and no lie, I spent the entire time of midnight mass in the bathroom, like all the time. Like there's very few times that I didn't. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, that's not worth it to me. But not everybody has those kind of like allergies or food intolerances. Yeah. So the way I have to deal with it would be a little bit different for somebody that doesn't have that kind of reaction. So it's like, enjoy it. Like, have fun, drink and be merry.
Well, and I think what's so interesting is that when you do make this a habit, that when you have those moments of like the splurges, the next day you're like, okay, I need to get back on track.
Yeah, because
I don't
feel good.
I don't feel good.
Yeah.
When you start to feel really great from eating clean, you realize how bad it feels.
You felt.
Yeah, eating the other stuff.
And it's way easier to stay motivated.
Yes.
It's kind of like the whole thought is like, if you can get past that and start to feel good, then it's easy.
Yeah.
It's way easier.
Yeah.
And then I don't feel like then it doesn't cause like a spiral. I think some people, if it is so restrictive, then they do get a little bit of it, then they like spiral into like, but if you don't restrict yourself, like you don't make it this, just human nature.
Yeah.
You like keep anything from anybody, they're going to want it more.
Right. Well, and I also think that sometimes when my body feels icky, I don't want to treat it well. Like, it's so weird, but it's just like when it's hurting or when it's feeling icky, then I'm just like, screw it.
I already feel like crap. I might as well.
Which is such a bad thought process.
It is. And it's also, a lot of that stuff is biological. And you think that it's just your thoughts, but so much of how we think affects our gut, and so much of our gut affects how we think. It's connected. And our stomach is our second brain. And the vagus nerve runs, and it's what talks to your stomach and up to your brain and to your face and all of, your throat and everything. And so when your stomach's out of balance, so is your mind. And so that's where a lot of people will have severe anxiety, or, you can control a lot of that stuff with the health of your stomach. Yeah. So it may truly be biologically like you're in a funk because your stomach's not right. And that, they say, I think it's 85%, it's not probably a direct quote, but I think it's like 85% of your serotonin is in your stomach.
Yes. Yeah.
So if that's all out of balance and the lining of your gut's out of whack and your microbiome and all your bacteria and all of that stuff is completely out of whack, you're not going to think well, and you're not going to be clear on your thoughts, and you're not going to feel happy, and you're not going to want to treat yourself well. You're just going to be like, ugh.
Right.
Feel like death.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. So it's all works together.
Yeah. Well, Kaylee, thank you so much for sharing your story and your tips. And I will say that you guys, if you follow Kaylee on Instagram and then on her blog and website as well, because she posts some really great tips, even on her Instagram, that I've learned a lot. Stuff like just like cutting an onion, I learned a lot from her. And she makes really cool lunches for her kids. I think are super creative.
Yeah, they're fun.
So follow Kaylee, and thank you so much, Kaylee.
Thank you for having me.
Being here and sharing. Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of the Heidi Rue Show podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you can catch the next one, and make sure you hit that bell. And if you'd like to listen via the podcast platforms, you can find those below. We would love to hear from you. Join in on the conversation on Instagram or Facebook. And I hope this episode encouraged you. Don't stop, get it, get it.